Super go-to-market bootcamp.
So here's where I go. And just like big picture, bluff, bottom line front, here is what I want you to leave with. And there's some premises to get there. Number one, an agency, and get rid of the word agency here. You could say company, you could say business. They live and die by their ability to create reoccurring impact. Reoccurring impact. If you've heard any of the stuff in the past that we talked about, you know this is not new. But what's the significance of this and why does this matter? There's some premises. Premise one, the higher the value and the higher the frequency, the higher the retention. Being retention is what matters. And you could call retention, and we'll go into the model eventually, but that retention could be cross-sell, it could be upgrades, it could be renewing a contract. Retention is the ability to create a next purchase. Next purchase. It could be project to project. It could be SOW based, but it's next purchase. Retention can be broad here. Premise two, if you have a retention issue, you have a what? A product issue. So when you have a retention issue in a company, and I don't say, hey, customer success, why weren't you able to keep them? Hey, delivery, it's your fault. No, it's a much deeper problem often. So you can't, like, retention is a product issue. And what product are you selling at an agency? Agencies sell an experience based on humans and a methodology. Based on humans and a methodology, and it's always an experience. And I have felt this more shifting from Rev Partners to Supered. In Rev Partners, when I was selling, I could sell me. I sold me. That's what I sold. I sold me, the way I think, the way I execute, the methodology, the human, right? And it was actually pretty easy to sell in that sense. Like, as long as you have these things structured, we were able to sell very quickly. Supered was not. I could be me and nobody cared. Nobody cared. Like, I can't push the buttons. I can't do the things I want. Because it's different. In an agency, you're selling safety. You're selling experience. You're selling a feeling. And how do you elicit that feeling? I think this is really important. And I just want to say this because it's almost like, man, I want these tactical things. No, you don't. It is the ability to create people and execute a method equals secret sauce. And you'll see this is often, especially in agencies, you can go from 1 to 2 people to 3 people. It is freaking hard to go 5+. It gets even harder when you hit 15+ to go there, because what are you doing? You're no longer you're replicating yourself. You're replicating an experience and a method and a way of thinking. And it's hard to do this. So what I'm trying to give today is a methodology for you to execute on this. Now, if you think about, what do you think about this, Matt? Like, this is why Supered exists. Like, this is why, like, how do I replicate this process, this feeling? This is what I'm thinking about a lot. Background, y'all seen this? I just want to put it here is, this feels weird to talk, because a lot of people, this is like network people to say, but I used to be in the military. I started Rev Partners. We went from untiered to elite in 13 months. We went from 0 to 5 million in revenue in 22 months, and then hit 10 million in year 3. 50+ people in 24 months, and then another 75, I think, in the year. When we do a job application, there's 100+ there. I'm no longer doing that, and so I've left and going to Supered, and we have the fastest growing app in the HubSpot marketplace at 1,200. The only thing that's ever beat us in terms of like growth of installs is ChatSpot, and that's our mesh, and that's cheating. It's not fair, but we're not the fastest. And then revenue 0 to 1 AAR in 7 months. And that is very, very quick. If you look at software, that is abnormally quick. And we'll see if we can continue the momentum. I'll say is I have a lot of videos that you'll see some of these thoughts come in. How do you become a HubSpot admin? The 5 stages. How do you think of it? What's the rollout summer school? And my mission, the only thing I think about right now, is creating the next generation of elite HubSpot partners. This is why I'm doing this. And I'm trying to get it all out, because I want to give everything I think to you for free and then help you do it. Okay. So it's like some of these problems, and I say this is, Matt, it's like, how did you think? I say this, you can go and search how to grow a digital agency or how to grow a consulting business. And you probably have, and you see all these, like, and they have great thumbnails, right? They usually involve cash with weird faces when you look at them. And if you go and search, like, here are your processes. They're going to tell you exactly what to do. They're going to be, again, faces with people, some sad, some happy, trying to tell you to do things. And then you have a bunch of books. Here are all the books you need to read to be able to execute. And I'm telling you, these are not bad things. What I want to say is I never read any of them. So, except for a couple that we'll talk about, but I'm going to say is, I think the way, like, I'll go to the problem set here is, why is this even here? Oh, I'm going to skip to that because there's just a lot here. And I have yet to find a specific model that I can eat well. It just takes a long time to digest. That's what I'll say. So I'm trying to give something and it may look the same, especially traction's probably the closest thing. If you haven't read that, that is the EOS model, probably the closest thing but it's still a bit different. And why do I care about this problem is because I want you to see this. We saw like our primary customers are over here. And then we are also, when we sell and we go to end users, we don't have just like I want you to see is we're going to shift to end users in about another 6 to 12 months. And when we shift, we're not going to have an onboarding team. We have partners. So our primary customers are partners. And if you're not able to do this, then we can't do this. So it's like, this is the thing I'm thinking about. And the thing that I'm like very aware of thinking about super. So here is the basic framework. It is basic. And I think basic things are good. So we can think through them. And there's really two different buckets. I call them humans, cultivating people, and the methodologies. Inside humans, and this is simple, and you'll say some of this is boring, but I think it's too important not to talk about. You have to have a vision. You have to have a mission. We've heard those words in nauseam, and they're probably pretty boring. I agree. I'll talk about how I think through those. You must have values and principles. And I'm going to talk to you how I think differently about those and how you make them. And then you need your one-page strategy. You'll see what that goes into. This is how you're humans. And it seems I'm going to give you these buckets, these categories to think in. I'll give you examples and we will have lessons on how to make them. Methodology. This is your method. You must have a POV and a niche. You must have an economic model that with a specific margins built in and based on how you're structured. You have to have a proven process and you need a proven way to do capacity planning. This is a specific thing for service businesses. And these are all the categories you need to be able to grow and scale. And you can then have a plan to potentially execute. So what I'm going to do for the rest of the time, this is an overview of this. I'm going to talk about how each one of these and how we can then go through just a tidbit. And then we're going to have less deep dive lessons, and every one of these will be extremely tactical. Problems. I want to say here are the problems and the reason why some of these things don't happen. I want to say this. You're duped by tactical gurus. The first thing we want to do is, how do you run a sales call? You don't need to know that first. That's not the first thing you need to know. How do I get leads? That's not the first thing you need to know. Like, these philosophical fundamentals will help you run a better sales call because you need to elicit emotion from people. And how to do that is your beliefs and your values and how you talk and how you execute. It is not a sales process I didn't have it. It's like your sales process is going to change 5 days. Every time you have you're constantly changing. It is not what you do. Don't be duped by tactical gurus. Get your base right, then invest. Number 2, you're not making decisions fast enough. Now, this is weird there's so much advice. You get paralyzed because of tactical gurus telling you to do something different, do this, do that, do this. And because you don't have your POV, you don't have a base in which to make decisions decisively. And number 3 is when you do make a decision, you change it the next day. So I talk about not making fast enough. You kind of get paralysis in this, like, not making a decision. And if you do one, it's not actually a decision. And then you don't commit hard enough to actually know if it works or not. So the thing in this is we need a holistic premise-based execution where I can make decisive decisions and I can commit to them tenaciously. That's what this methodology will help you execute on. And you're going to have, these are the qualities. If you don't, there's the issues. You have a quality issue of delivery. You have capacity issue because you can't get people, you never have enough time to do more. It's difficult to hire people. You have retention issues, both internally because they don't want to be there anymore, and externally because people aren't happy with what they have. And you have revenue issues because people either leave retention wise or you can't get new leads. And this all like this big jumble of things that's always happening. And then you run out of cash, which is like cash flow would be a whole nother section that you don't need that to win. You can raise money. So why is cash flow not here? Because it's not cash flow in finance. You can pay someone to help you think about that. This stuff over here, you can't, it's you doing it. So why is cash flow not here? Because you can always raise, if you have humans and you have the ability to process, you can raise money. Just to be clear, You can raise money. You can get money. That's supposed to be animated, but we'll say this. So how's this all working? Serious. I have lesson. What is go-to-market for services? That's what we're doing right now. It's like, here's the holistic understanding of a framework for go-to-market. We have then lesson 2 will be cultivating people, mission, vision, values, operating principles. But each one of these will have homework. Each one of these have very things to be able to execute on and to build. Lesson 3 is a one-page strategy, and a one-page strategy has a whole bunch of stuff in it. It is very difficult to make a holistic strategy in one page, but we'll give you all the tools you need to execute on that and do it. Number 4 is the method, POV and niche. We'll talk about how to create it, how to get it, what exercises to do in order to establish your own, and why it's okay to be absolutely incorrect. Number 5, the economic model. This is going to be, how do I at scale hit 50% to 40% gross margin, both with having capacity and hiring? Like, it's all this built in. This will dictate your package. This will dictate how people are buying from you. That's based on your niche. That's based on your, I just want to, like, these things all kind of cascade into each other. Then what is your proven process and your capacity modeling, and how do you put those two things together? And then it's all built on this, and I will put it to it. If you heard the bow tie, like, how do, as a service company, I apply this to a bow tie model itself so I can understand and do rev ops. By the way, you see this is a little bit of my POV, right? Like, my POV is everything exists on a bow tie model from a value, like a VM, and it allows me to think about things in ways and make decisions very quickly, but you will have a different POV. Okay, I'm going to stop right now. And Deanna, are there any questions thus far to be able to answer? And then I'm going to go into, just go line by line on each one of these in more detail.
Yeah, you got it. So Caleb restated Scott's question on why you want to create the next generation of elite partners, and creating that next generation of elite partners without Super, we can't scale. Super can't scale without those elite partners. And going to the end users.
1 second.
Oh, well, not good.
Is that the question?
That is the question restated.
See, I'm going to restate it as I understood it. Is
Please.
Why is Super's objective to create the next generation of elite partners?
Yes.
It was a side question. I was really like, Matt, what is your emotional passion? Like, why did you want to create Supered
Correct.
and the next generation of elite partners?
Received. In scaling rev partners, and I think you'll see this because you'll get a little bit of this in the POV, and or just the economic model. Part of the economic model was, and like having to recreate and train, is we had a very intense like delivery. Like, hey, this is how you communicate. This is what you do. Here's your process. Here's your artifacts. And you'll see, like, we did this, everything. And that it worked. It worked, period. I felt so much friction in actually creating the experience I wanted to create. And so what Supered is here's how this is the tool I wish I had specifically for the economic model. Because gross margin, it is so difficult to scale a people first business if you don't have the tech that allows you to like recreate the model itself. Because it's just, the time itself just gets very difficult, and the margins are constantly squeezed.
Perfect.
So period. I'm gonna say this, I'll put it out. Yeah, like, yes, I help create competitors to go against rev partners. Yes, Supered at $1 million is worth more than a service company at $10 million. Or the same. I just like, there are different valuations. And so it's another one is like, this is to me, like, this is the idea that there's a watershed in the HubSpot ecosystem that like we have too much need in the HubSpot ecosystem and not people to execute on it. So,
Great.
Okay. Any other questions?
I think you're good.
Okay. I'm going to vision and mission. The most probably, I actually don't like talking about these things. Like I do not enjoy talking about mission and vision because it gets, you spend a week, you spend all this time and nobody like makes a decision on what is our vision and mission. So I'm going to like, here's my, but, which I don't like to use buts, and you'll actually see that in principle. Whether we win or lose, it's not, and I just want to hear, it's not finance, it's not strategy, it's not technology. It is only teamwork and the ability to replicate people that are working with you. It is the ultimate competitive advantage because your methodology may change, but what does not change? Your vision and often your mission and your principles and your values. So what we're about to go into are those things. These are the unchangeable things that will allow everything else to cascade around. I love this proverb as an African proverb is, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go further, go together. And then a little Babe Ruth is just saying you can hire the best people, which is all saying you can hire the best people in the market and you're still not going to outcompete a great team because it will create dissension, resentment, and eventually divorce and what like business divorces. Okay. How do we do this? I think the best way for me to talk about this is I'm going to show you Super's missions. And so you can see it is our vision. And the thing I love doing the most, like is building businesses that help people unlock potential for human flourishing. And so one of the questions Scott asked, like, Matt, why do you care about this? When I was doing Rev Partners, it was the same type of mission, the same type of vision. Honestly, it didn't change. This is a thing we love doing. How do I help people express more fully like the human creativity and beauty? Super, it is that, right? It's the ability for partners. It's the ability for us internally at Super, allowing people to like, so it's supposed to internal and external vision. Missions, how do we execute that mission is via two ways. Now this is weird because you should only have one, but we have two, and you'll understand why we have two when I get to one of our point of views. Mission is we enable partners to deliver recurring value more often to clients. That sounds a whole like the bluff we just talked about, by the way. This is the thing we think about. How do we do that? It's we create the next generation of elite partners. So this is what I think about, what we think about, period. There's absolutely zero chance we're going to be able to create the next generation of elite partners if we don't help our partners serve their clients, period. Thus, there is a secondary, we enable users to enable revenue processes with the outcome of creating a enablement operating system for revenue teams with a that is partner first. Okay, so these are the missions. Now, what are these things? Is this vision is aspirational, and we're going to go much deeper. Vision, aspirational, it's an almost impossible. That's what you want. Almost an impossible goal. Your mission is how am I doing that? And it's something very specific with verbs that allow you to execute. And there's an outcome to that mission when it's done well. Very simple framework. Again, I'll give this for us to be able to do when we do the exercise in more depth. Again, I'm not spinning because we're going to go much deeper into this. I just want to start to inspire how we do this. Number two, values, principles. This is the most important part. After this, I actually think this is the most important portion of the human stuff. And here are the two books this is taken from. I do recommend you read these. This is how we think about in Rev Partners. This is how, when I was there, this is what we do at Supered. And much of this, 80% of this is all inspired here with our then take on it. There's a whole exercise that you can do with your team that will probably be very enlightening on whether or not you're following these principles. There's a QR code. You get this afterwards that you can do. It's free. This is the 5 dysfunctions models. And it's so incredibly simple and beautiful, but it's also freaking difficult. To keep people focused on a collective result, there's only one way to do that. Hold people accountable out of love. But the only way to hold people accountable is if they've committed to a common goal. And the only way to get them to do that is if they have expressed their opinion and feel heard or disagreed passionately and had conflict. And the only way you can have conflict is if people trust each other because they actually say what they think and are vulnerable. So you can be you can be impressive or you can be known, but you cannot be both. So if you think I'm impressive, it's because you don't know me as a point. And I really mean there's this level of vulnerability that has to happen to be able for this to occur. Now, how do you do this? This is the model. This is a pyramid model. And this is something we talk about every single day. Again, I'll put more details when we go through our lessons, how you cascade messaging this, how you put it into your daily rhythms, like the tactical stuff, just staying philosophical, is trust, conflict, commitment, accountability, results. Each one of these has a very specific action: be vulnerable, demand candid feedback, require clarity, confront difficult situations. But how do you do that at scale? I'm going to put this as, it seems so easy, but how many people have been at a company and this just isn't true? If you go and people don't actually say what they mean. They ask passive aggressive statements. This is elusive because our human nature, we unknowingly fall prey to these things. And the moment you don't say what you think, you just created a place where you're not transparent and vulnerable, and resentment, and the whole pyramid comes tumbling down. So how do you do it? And I think this is difficult. And what is a competitive advantage? If you're not doing this, you will not be able to scale a large company. You will not be able to build past 15 to 30 people. You just will not be able to build, regardless of strategy, regardless of how your economic model. It doesn't matter. And this requires a level of discipline and persistence that is uncommon. And so how have I tried to tackle this? How have I tried to tackle this? It is through this. So there are a lot of tools here that we'll talk much more in details and go into these with some exercises. Like in our offsite, we did the personal history exercises. We all cried, or not everybody, but most of us cried during include like, and so like we're talking all these different places. Now, what we've done is I'm going to introduce the concept here. And by the way, this public goals, what is that? Public standards. Those are traditionally called values. I think values are complete and utter. Steve tells me to be careful about bombastic statements, but I'm gonna say anyway. I think core values are utter crap, or most of the time. Why? Because they don't mean anything. They don't mean the same thing to each other. How do you make your core values actually mean? And so this is what every time I hear a CEO talk about a company of core values, I literally picture this in my head, like this statement, like core values, because you're like, oh, our core value is to bias to action. I'm like, hey, that's funny. I've been asking for approval for 2 weeks and haven't got a statement. Clearly, you're wrong. So like, as soon as you do that, you lose, like the pyramid's gone. So how do you institutionalize? How do you inculcate a specific way? So you get this is you're like, I'm drinking Coke, but it's actually Dr. Pepper and I hate it. This is your internal employees. And there is no way you're going to be able to do your method if your internal employees don't like what they're drinking. Yes, everybody has to drink the Kool-Aid and they have to like it. And this is like best companies, they turn into cults. And if you, sorry, I'm gonna say this again, bombastic statements. Best companies, people actually like being there and being with the people. And there's a certain way they're talking. There's a certain aroma they're giving, the aroma of life or an aroma of death. And another thing is not everybody will like it because some people don't like Dr. Pepper. Some people like Sprite. And they should taste it and know it during the interview process. So what do I call? I'm going to introduce the idea called values and operating principles. We'll go through a whole way of how we create those. And these are the values: clear, positive, supportive, self-starting. Again, you see that, you're like, those values are meaningless to you, as they should be, because words on a piece of paper don't mean anything. What matters? The behaviors and the expectations they are. So clear. Let me give you one example. So here's what clear means at Supert. And some of this, like, you're like, man, I don't know if I want to work at Supert. I just want to be like, then you don't like Dr. Pepper. Is no, like, if you're running a meeting, you share your screen. There's one person running the meeting, and whoever's doing that, share a screen and takes notes every time. End of discussion. If you're on a meeting and someone doesn't happen, you will hear who's running the meeting. Like there will be this, or I'll share my screen and there'll be a fight. Okay. Recaps. Every meeting that occurs, there's a recap sent after every single time. And if it doesn't, you're told bad boy, bad girl, like you're confronted about it. Number 3, bluffs. You heard us start. Bottom line up front. We start meetings with end states. Here's what we will accomplish today. And if you start a meeting and you're talking, you will be interrupted saying, what is the end state and why am I here? Every single time. Conviction. When we communicate, we don't say the words, man, I kind of think that. Because often we use these these filler words that don't mean something. And I may be 100% sure, but I just don't want to come off as too aggressive. And so I'm trying to negate it. And so my kind of, but sometimes I actually mean kind of, and it's like 20%. I don't really care. So we use, honestly, I'm 20%. Like when I say statements, sometimes people think I'm like 90% and I'm really 10%. So I have to like, hey, I'm 10% about this, but I think you should do it this way. And so we're able to be very clear about what your conviction is. Some people are not emotional at all and you don't know what they think. And you're like, I'm 100% certain this is right. You're like, okay, perfect. So I don't really have an opinion. Execute. So it allows you to be very clear and go quick. We ask yes, no questions, not open-ended. So things like, Scott Flanagan, did you do this thing you committed to on that date? Yes or no? Well, I was thinking, yes, no, then tell me. Yes, no, then. No. Perfect. Okay, now what do you need? Right, so it's yes, no, and we get in the habit. And then we have a very specific way we communicate. We don't write long paragraphs. We only write in bullets, and there's bolds and underlines. Again, this can say, is this obnoxious? No, there's no way that I'm going to say this is the way you institutionalize what it means. And people find this is liberating to people. Over communicate as much as you think, and then do double it. So if you get too many emails from us, know executing a principle. Okay, there are a lot of these around the whole, like acknowledge comms. We say the word received verbally. If somebody says, hey, Hey, Tom, that's a really good point. I don't want to talk about it right now. We'll talk about it next meeting. Here's what we're here for. Here's our end state. Is it okay if we continue talking about this and talk about that next meeting? What we don't do is say, pretend Tom never said anything and move to the next topic, which is what most people do. So these little things mean a lot. I'm going to just continue. So these are operating principles. We will go through how to make them and put them a part of your values. And actually, you see this, the best, we'll do an exercise of write down the things that you care about and you would like to replicate, that you value, like things you celebrate your team with. And you actually create your values last. You create them last, not first. Okay. I'm not going to go through, because there's a lot of these. Again, you'll have these for us to look at. Feel free to copy them. One-page strategy. So here's a one-page strategy, has all these things together. It's this vision, mission. So now I have this vision, mission. I know where I'm generally going. I have inside of that, I have the values, and this is our principles that allow us to go there in communication and like our culture. Goals, here's the actual goal, 1 and 3 years. And then here are the initiatives that are going to allow us to get there. We have both enabling, internal growth, external, and all of them have one metric to hit. So we'll go through an exercise. This is where traction probably rears its head the most. If you think about EOS, where you have that 1 year, 3 year, 10-year goal, you have your BHAG, and there are initiatives to do it. I actually don't like OKRs. I've done it. I didn't like it. So we don't do them anymore, but I still talk in like rocks and sand. This is coming from traction methodology. Okay. And here's what it looks like. This is super. It's one-page document. And again, you'll have this for you to be able to have. And you'll see it. Here's our vision. Here's our mission, values. We have our 1 year, 3 year goal. And then the core strategies we have inside of those are three growth, 2 enablement, and each of them have a very specific metric that we're looking annually. I'll give one so you're seeing through it. One of our growths is be prolific. One of those is create an absurd amount of content that breeds a following. This is part of that. Just an example. This is a clear like initiative that doesn't even fit like one of those, which is under series. What are we doing? Go to market series. We're creating a video first series that tells stories about revenue teams to help them execute, and the only thing we care about is LinkedIn followers of our company account. So when we're making decisions and we're thinking about, hey, does it fit within our growth initiatives? And does it fit within our yes, no? And then we execute on it. So it allows us to move very quickly. Just give an example of this. We go this next. We're moving to I'm going to stop for a second because we're moving to methodology. We're going to go much deeper into this idea. I hate the word replicate humans. It's like cloning. It's probably bad, but this is agencies by definition are people first. And so when you start them, they often have founders. And what you're doing is replicating the experience the founders give and like where you're starting. And that is what's difficult. And so these are the ways you can start doing it. Deanna, are there any questions to answer at this time before I go into the method?
There aren't currently any questions. I think everyone is just diving in with you. Tony says, Matt, you seem to be missing a key ingredient here without which no one would be able to copy you. Tony, would you like to enlighten us what that is?
Tony is just, Tony has the best English. I'm going to call it
Careful,
Wales.
careful.
Yeah, I almost called you English. Forgive me. Wales humor. Thank you, Tony. But do you want to expound on that, or is that a joke?
No. I think you're potentially. I don't know whether you're blind to it. I doubt that, knowing your background. But I think it's worth mentioning it when you're talking about building the culture, especially. And for what it's worth, I agree with you on principles. The only way your organization is allowed to develop the way that you want it to develop is because of the strength of the leadership in the organization. Leadership is always the answer. And Superd is so clearly well led, whether that's you visibly, Steve less perhaps visibly, and whoever else is around in your SMT. But I think it's critical for organizations that haven't experienced this, don't have that degree of leadership experience to understand these cultures. You can't stick these posters up on the wall and put these meetings into your calendar and stick the buzzwords around and remind. You want people to be vulnerable. You have to create a space where people can be vulnerable. That is the #1 leadership activity in any developing organization. If you truly create a space for people to be vulnerable, then you are winning at all sorts of things, not least life. There's so many companies who will tell you they have a space where people can be vulnerable, and it's bollocks. That's the Welsh, humorous Welsh term for you. It's just not true. there's too much politics, there's too much backbiting, there's too much competition for resources, there's too much siloization, and so on and so on and so on. So I'm applauding this. I'm watching it. I'm thinking, yeah, spot on, bang on, love it, love it, love it. It does not happen without great leadership.
Received. We will deep dive on, and specifically in the vision, mission, value principles on how to create that. I do think great leaders are not born, they are made, and you can, and I say whether leadership, there are just certain principles you can enact that will allow you to create these spaces well, but, and we'll go deeper into what it takes very specifically, what number one is, if the leader's not vulnerable, then everything else fails. So like it, and we'll talk about what that actually takes. And I'll go through my story to be able to do that. I'll be vulnerable with y'all. So y'all see what it takes. Methodology. Okay. So this is the hardest thing. So you have a methodology. Everybody has a methodology. And if you're getting past this, it just takes you writing it down. And so every agency, every consulting business starts with one person, maybe two people, maybe three, and they have it all in here. And the faster you get out of here, the better you are. What did Rev Partners do a really good job of? Is I stayed up, I did way too much work. I got 3 hours of sleep at night, and I wrote every freaking thing down. So that I could sleep at night 6 months from now. So there is, and I love this statement. Some people don't. No pain, no gain. And sometimes you have to, you as an agency owner, you have to live unbalanced, and you get to choose. Do I do it at a short period of time, or do I do it forever? And you make the choice. I made the choice to do it a short period of time. So you think about a little bit of super is how do I then take that out of my head and be able to distribute that and do scale? That's a little bit of super. So I'm going to say this is, I like Peter Thiel's, and he is part of the PayPal group. This is Elon Musk. He is a crazy, you don't necessarily have to agree with his social politics, but he's a brilliant businessman. And he says this, and I agree with this. It is, he's thought a lot, and he calls it a paradox. He's thought a lot about what's the formula for creating entrepreneurship. And he says one doesn't exist. However, there is a pattern, and that pattern is entrepreneurs find value in unexpected places. And they do this about thinking about business in first principles. Now, what does that mean, practicality? That means this. He came up with this idea called the power of the contrarian. And the more contrarian points you have that are right, the better you are. So I just asked the question. I just want to go through is, what important truth do you hold that very few people support? And in a business context, that is what? What truth do I hold? What secret do I have? And a secret in business means how many people are calling you dumb? How many people disagree with you that you are wrong? And the longer you are publicly wrong, that's called arbitrage opportunity in economics, the more successful you will be. So when you're thinking about, like, when you're a founder, you have intuitively seen this in some, how do you take that, crystallize that contrarian point and start putting it into your strategy and your methodology? So I put this in some more context. Zigs when they zag. This is, you'll see this over and over again. And I'll point out the patterns. Apple. People thought Apple were absolutely crazy, and we don't really comprehend it. Betting your entire business and hundreds of $millions on an innovation that people think's bad and doing it anyway, and then being called a genius after the fact. You are not called a genius or a leader when you're doing it. You're only called after, and you have to be okay with the risk. Uber, Airbnb, we literally go to strangers' houses in strangers' cars. That is they were called dumb. HubSpot has done this over and over again. And there's a lot of examples, but I'm gonna be more specific with HubSpot since we are HubSpotties, Spracteers, Hubolution. Focus on SMB. They focused on the SMB. They were told not to. They went wide. They didn't go deep. You know who did go wide or who went deep? Marketo. We don't like Marketo. Just examples, like there are people who went wide, there are people who didn't. Build and didn't buy. They built everything. They were told not to when they got investment. Now they're doing a bimodal process, go to market. And this, I just want to they say it, nobody does this. Like Steel. They are building both for SMBs and enterprise, and it slows them down. But they're saying this is actually our competitive advantage because we have to build easy to use products. So as we do come out with enterprise use cases, it's better because SMBs have to be able to use it, right? And it's just and they're saying this is our competitive advantage. They're told that's not what you do. You shouldn't do that. And then they were told not to compete against Salesforce, but they did it anyway. Now we look at HubSpot, success. These are crazy ideas, and they had a bunch of them, and it worked. So it's gonna be, what are yours? Here's some of, I just like, we have lots of these, I'd say, in Super Rev Partners. When I was doing Rev Partners, it was in 2020, and you may have heard these things. I still say adoption is more important than the tool or the process. That's a contrarian point that I think is right, but and it's like built on that. And there's some of these points that now more people believe, but no, everybody thought they would say. Some people, when I was in a sales meeting, wouldn't ever show back up. So like, just want to be, what are your contrary points? Like us, Super, I'll pick one. Let's do channel first. Is we are building a channel first company, and everyone says not to do that. You look at anywhere, they say not to do that. We're building a product with partners. And why don't you build for partners? You don't build for partners because they have cash flow issues. They tend to go dark because they all of a sudden don't have any capacity, because they have to do projects and they stop talking to you for a point in time. It's hard to get traction. There's all these issues of why people don't build for partners. And that's why there isn't anything for partners. And we're saying, no, we're going to build for the partner, and we are going to actually, and they're going to like us more because of it. And it's a risk. And doing that, we can go to the users with partners. We'll have a coefficient of scale. Every investor I'm talking about, they literally say, Matt, that is a bad idea. That is not scalable. Example. Now you feel it differently, maybe because you're here and you're part of this ecosystem. Institutional investors think that's crazy. Economic model. I just put this here. We're going to go way deep into this, but it is, if you don't have a gross margin of 40% or higher, you have a bad economic model, period. So you have to get there. And then you're going to have like all these levers you can pull and how you're doing it. But it's like, what is your cost per thing? You must have your thing. Is it per hour? Is it per sprint point? Is it per X? What is your revenue per employee, right? Like there's these different things that you think about in your economic model. You must be able to scale. And your cost per X. What's your efficiency model? Which is your capacity? How am I judging based on the X? Maybe it's the hour. How do I know? Here's how many hours I have. Here's the efficiency I'm running at. Here's the efficiency I want to run at. And all these then create your pods. Like, how do you structure? And your gross margin and your model will dictate how people are buying from you. Is it high touch, low touch? Are you going to be customer first? Are you going to be known as, are you going to do low custom? Are you going to do high custom? There's all these things, but any economic model can work. But then you have to take that economic model. You have to commit hard to it. And then you need to think about, okay, now how do I go to market? If you've seen this, you're going to go to market. This is where we get into. Now we can actually start talking about your tactics. Tactics are only relevant to how people are buying from you. Not how you want people to, but how people are buying from you. And it's very specific based on your total contract value. If you're selling a $120,000 account, then you need to run sales differently and marketing differently than if you're doing a $15,000 project, period. You structure your business differently if you're doing that. And we'll go into that. We're going to structure. I had a picture of pods. I don't know where it is. Now so as we get through this, then you need to have, even if you make this up, you have a proven process. And I'll show you some of what I did for, this was back in 2021. I don't even know what they're doing now. We have this idea. We took a flywheel and we made a pretty picture out of it, which is saying we put RevOps in the middle. And our POV was RevOps is the glue of everything. And if you don't do that, you can't do anything else. And we're not an agency, we're a consultancy. So your point of view starts coming out. And so we help you put this together. Everyone else is doing it wrong. Here is a very specific way that allows you to execute on that. We have a go-to-market strategy session that has a specific artifact that informs our process mapping. Then it allows us to do a tech audit where we then give you prioritized recommendations. You could copy this slide and it will sell things for you because it looks like you've thought through it. Then we have a specific structure. This is part of our economic model. We say, hey, in this, with a little bit of our point of view, see, these all these go together. Your point of view will inform your economic model. You get an entire RevOps department for less than an FTE. And here's how we structure this. Here's what they do. And then we give you these artifacts that help you think through, that'll help you execute on, that help us inform what you've done, because we've done this before. Here's how we communicate. Here's a revenue strategy and our processes. Here is how we meet with you. And here's our guarantee is if you're not happy, you can exit for any time at 90 days. And we're doing 12-month contracts. So you say this, we have a method of delivery, you have your artifacts of delivery, you have how you communicate, you have your economic model, you have your point of view, and then you have your culture. And when you have those two things, these things start to marry. So let me go back to end state. We're all thinking, how do we create reoccurring impact? And it is through both creating humans and executing a method. Here are the categories to think about, and our next lessons will all be about very specific tactical ways to create those.